First, the good news. 3 stars to Bill O'Reilly for shining the spotlight on what I believe is one of the most important topics in American history. In fact, it's so important that you really even can't call it history. The Kennedy assassination is a live murder case because it's an unsolved murder, and therefore it's not history at all. So thanks to Bill for writing a book on this very important topic. Unfortunately, that's where the thank yous end. There's a major problem with this book, which basically renders it useless for any serious student of the Kennedy assassination. It has no footnotes. And that means if you want to check O'Reilly's sources to make sure that they're not contradicted or that he was citing them correctly, you can't. Now, you might think that the editors of this book have done that work for you, but I can assure you they haven't. Let me just focus on 2 small paragraphs to show you what I'm talking about. Both of these paragraphs are located on page 261. Here's the first paragraph. Notice, no footnotes, and you're about to find out why. To save time, I'm going to discuss the first 2 sentences in the comments section below this video and focus here on the 3rd sentence. Instead, he moves a pile of boxes into position on the grimy 6th floor of the depository building, fashioning a well-concealed shooting nest. In short, O'Reilly is saying Oswald moved these boxes. Let's look at the picture of this shooting nest. This is Warren Commission Exhibit 723, and as you can see, the boxes are, just like O'Reilly says, strategically located to hide the position of an assassin located at that window. But, unfortunately for O'Reilly's claim, it wasn't Oswald who put those boxes there. It was actually other depository employees. David Bellin, a lawyer for the Warren Commission, wrote the following on page 146 of his book, You Are the Jury. Note what Bellin says. The shield had been constructed by employees. And if you read the testimony underlying Bellin's statement in Volume 3 of the Commission hearings, pages 163 and 231, and Volume 7 of the hearings, page 392, you see there's no evidence whatsoever that Oswald had any role in positioning those boxes. Here's Bellin again, writing on page 450 of his book. Bellin says, paradoxically, the assassin did not even have to move most of these cartons. The shield had been placed there by the other employees laying the plywood floor. So, O'Reilly's statement that Oswald constructed the shield is directly contradicted by a lawyer for the Warren Commission who, unlike O'Reilly, actually looked at the evidence. That paragraph shot down. Let's go to the next one up for discussion, which states that Oswald quickly sights the Mannlicher Carcano, taking aim through his scope. Since you already know that a very significant portion of the so-called sniper's lair was not constructed by Oswald, and since we don't have any footnotes, we already have doubts about this paragraph. Doubts well justified, because the evidence tells a very different story. The fatal shot did not come from that window. Take a look at Warren Commission Exhibit 388. This drawing was prepared under the supervision of doctors at President Kennedy's autopsy, and at first glance, it seems to show a shot from the 6th floor because the angle of the bullet path roughly matches the angle from the depository, approximately 17 degrees downward. Unfortunately for the Warren Commission and Bill O'Reilly, instead of proving that the fatal shot came from the depository, this exhibit actually proves the opposite when you take a look at this frame from the Zapruder film. You'll note that the angle of the president's head right before he was shot is far less extreme than the drawing. This was a very important discovery made by Stuart Gallinor, the author of an excellent book on the Kennedy assassination entitled Cover-Up. Gallinor asked the question, what would happen if we tilted Exhibit 388 to match the angle of frame 312? Here's Exhibit 388, and here's the exhibit tilted to match Zapruder frame 312. Uh-oh. As you can see, the angle of the shot now goes up through the head, not down. In fact, this is an absolutely impossible angle for a shot from the depository, which proves that the doctors at the autopsy could not have possibly observed this, and so, when they reported it as true, they had to have been lying or grossly incompetent. Well, in a second major investigation in 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations decided to produce a separate drawing, and to fix the problem, they moved the entry point of the wound to the president's head up a whopping 4 inches. Here's the drawing they produced, JFK Exhibit F66. When we take a look at the 2 drawings side by side, we can instantly see how evidence has been manipulated. The drawing on the left, authorized by autopsy doctors, shows a wound that is going upwards, approximately 15 degrees through the president's head. But the second drawing, produced from photographs and x-rays, shows that the wound is going down approximately 19 degrees. So, if you ever thought autopsy doctors could never be wrong, photographs and x-rays examined by 9 forensic pathologists prove otherwise. But, amazingly enough, the 9 forensic pathologists, working from photographs and x-rays, produced a drawing just as illegitimate, as we discover when we take a look at the accurate drawing, one produced by Dr. Robert McClelland of Parkland Hospital, who had an extremely close-up view of the president's head for over 10 minutes. Here's the drawing authorized by Dr. McClelland, which shows a wound that exited from the rear of the president's head, which means the shot was from the front. How do we know that McClelland's drawing is true? Because it corresponds with the reports of over 40 eyewitnesses at Parkland Hospital and Bethesda Naval Hospital, including Dr. Charles Crenshaw, Dr. Ronald Jones, Dr. McClelland, Dr. Paul Peters, Dr. Kenneth Salyer, Dr. Charles Carrico, Dr. Richard Delaney, and Nurse Audrey Bell, among many, many others, as the previous still frames from video taken by Kennedy assassination researcher Robert Groden clearly show. So, now that we know the fatal shot was from the front, we also know that shot was not made by Lee Harvey Oswald, supposedly located at the rear. I say supposedly because, in fact, there's additional evidence that Oswald was not even at that window. Take a look at these 2 photographs which, according to evidence produced by the Warren Commission, were taken after the last shot. Here's the first photograph, made by Thomas Dillard. And here's the second photograph, made by James Powell. Remember, both these photographs, according to evidence, were taken after the last shot. Now let's take a look at the 2 photographs side by side. Note that the boxes on the left do not match the boxes on the right. It's perfectly clear that boxes have been moved in the window, and that is in fact what the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded. As the House noted, there's an apparent rearranging of boxes within 2 minutes after the last shot was fired at President Kennedy. And that's a case killer because at that time, Oswald wasn't on the 6th floor. He was down on the 2nd floor, talking to Officer M.L. Baker and Depository Superintendent Roy Truly. In short, the evidence shows that right after the assassination, the person at that window was not Oswald. You know, with all the suspicious movement of boxes at the depository, in part due to the laying of a plywood floor, you might be interested to know who the owner of the depository was, the man who ostensibly had ultimate approval over the floor redo. It was this man, D. Harold Byrd, in a photo taken at a 1973 University of Texas football game. And look who happened to be with him at that football game. None other than Lyndon Baines Johnson. Now, LBJ, that's mighty poor taste. Going to a football game with a man who owned the building from which the shots that killed Kennedy were supposedly fired. Food for thought, don't you think? Believe it or not, there's much more evidence along the same lines, but I think I've made my point. If you're looking for evidence of Oswald's innocence, you're not going to find it in Bill O'Reilly's book. Instead, what you are going to find are numerous allegations, which are not only unsupported, but which are in fact positively contradicted by the evidence. And that means that Bill O'Reilly's book is a work of fiction. If you want to read fiction on the Kennedy assassination, there are better choices. And if you want the facts, I'd suggest you steer clear of Bill O'Reilly's book, Killing Kennedy.